So we talked about the fact that Washington State, despite all the taxes, despite all of your money that you're giving to state government, is facing this massive potential budget deficit. Well, it turns out that that deficit and the budget crisis that our state is going to be in is probably worse than we even thought. This segment is brought to you in partnership with our friends over at Future 42. Turn your frustration into action at future42.org. So Governor Jay Inslee over the weekend was in Azerbaijan, of course, on one of his climate missions. So as our governor is jet setting around the world, talking about his number one issue, he's sending a letter back to his agencies at home saying, hey, you need to tighten your belts, which the fact that he was in Azerbaijan while he's saying that, jet setting around the world, and then telling his agencies, you need to tighten your belts because we're facing this massive budget deficit. The irony of that is not lost on me. But Governor Inslee, via the Office of Financial Management, they sent out a letter to agency directors across the state and said, hey, things are going to be bad. It says the magnitude of the operating budget deficit is between $10 and $12 billion. Over the 4-year outlook period, this deficit is due to the recent revenue forecasts that were adjusted down and the increase in caseloads and the cost to maintain existing programs. Wow, that's a really government way of saying we spend too much money and we don't budget well. The budget is a work in progress, and we need your assistance to propose a budget that best reflects the needs of our state. To assist with this effort, I direct agencies to propose operating and transportation budget reductions, starting with pauses or delays of programs, and to identify savings options for both the 2025 supplemental budgets and the 2025-27 budget. Please consider measures that will result in immediate savings, such as hiring and other freezes. Okay, I have some ideas for immediate savings, Nicole. I'm sure you know some of them. But look, our state's budget has doubled in recent years. We just in the last few years, you didn't. Democrats in Olympia passed an insane amount of new taxes. Think about it. The long-term care tax is fairly recent, where they're taking money out of every single one of your paychecks to fund a long-term care program that nobody even wanted. That's happening. You have the capital gains tax, which is brand spanking new, that's bringing a ton of money into the state coffers. You have the Climate Commitment Act, which, because you're paying more money at the gas pump, because you're paying more money for your energy at home, the state is getting more money than it ever dreamed of via the Climate Commitment Act and the Cap and Trade Program. All of this new money coming in, a budget that has already doubled in recent years, spending more money than ever before, money on things that are absolutely absurd, that in no realm should the government be funding or spending money on. And they're still facing, over the next 4 years, a $10 to $12 billion budget deficit. And I will say, I was looking for it today. I couldn't quite find it before the show. Maybe I'll find it for tomorrow's show. Republicans were putting out press releases warning about this at the onset of the pandemic, that our budget had just bloated, and that every time a cent came in that was new, that cent went right out the door, and they weren't thinking about, okay, if we have a little bit of restriction in terms of the amount of money that's coming in, our revenue forecasts, et cetera, that we're going to be in a world of hurt. Republicans were literally saying exactly that. Several years ago, putting out press releases saying Democrats need to stop this tax and spend runaway situation that they're in. Nobody listened to them, of course. And Democrats continue to do it. Oh my gosh, as I said a million times, they will spend any cent that you're willing to give them. And Washington voters have been willing to give them an awful lot of money. This from Washington State Standard. With a $10 billion deficit looming, Washington's governor calls on state agencies to make cuts. And again, okay, you think the only thing they're going to do is make cuts? What do you think they're going to do if they're facing a $10 to $12 billion budget deficit? Anybody? Bueller? Yeah, they're going to try to implement new taxes. They aren't going to make cuts, you guys. You think that they're going to cut all these programs that they just love? Of course not. They're going to use this as an excuse to push through new taxes. In the State Standard, Senator June Robinson, a Democrat from Everett, who's the chair of the Senate Ways and Means Committee and the chamber's lead budget writer, says of the budget challenge they're facing, they are not overstating it. Because of the magnitude, we're going to need to look at a range of options. Asked if the options include spending cuts and new revenue, she said yes, there it is, new revenue. And here is exactly what is going to happen. I want you to mark 6:31 p.m. on November 18th. Brandi called this, that new revenue is going to be a reduction, is going to be an expansion, rather, of the capital gains tax. And it is what they've been trying to do this entire time. And voters just declined to repeal the tax on capital gains. And we warned you, what do we warn you? Over and over, okay. Well, if we don't repeal the tax on capital gains right now, they are going to make sure that the tax on capital gains applies to more people. They had already tried to push a bill that would take the threshold from $250,000 if you sell that much in stocks or bonds or other assets in a given year. Capital gains tax applies to you. And they already tried to drop it in a bill to the threshold from $250,000 to $15,000. So now that didn't happen, that didn't work, but now voters didn't repeal the tax on capital gains, and now they're like, oh, budget deficit, which isn't a budget deficit, it's a spending problem. They have a serious, serious spending problem. It's like a college girl with her daddy's credit card, and the daddy just can't say no. That's what our state is doing for state lawmakers. We just haven't said no. So they have a serious spending problem. It's not a budget deficit. But rather than take a hard look at their budget and what they're spending money on, like, I'm sorry, sending out bids for government contracts for laser hair removal for transgender prison inmates. I mean, that's how much money we have that they can fund things like that. Rather than doing that like every other family would have to do, like every citizen of Washington state would have to do if they're facing a situation where they can't pay their bills, they're going to tax you even more. And they're going to take a tax that they have said up and down is for the richest of the rich, and they're going to make it apply to everyone, even the middle class. And I would not put it past them to change the tax on capital gains to make sure that the sale of your primary home, that profit from selling your house is a capital gain that they can tax. So we called it, and this is paving the path for that. So again, I know you guys know this. I'm not going to say I told you so to you, but I'm going to say I told you so to the people who don't watch the show, who should watch this show, because then they wouldn't be surprised by these things. It's just absolutely unbelievable. 10 to 50, I can't even imagine. I cannot even imagine a government getting as much money as they're getting in revenue, still being $10 to $12 billion short. But that's what happens. I mean, I could talk about this forever. That's what happens when, like, Governor Jay Inslee has his right-of-way initiative to remove homeless encampments from along state highways, and they spend $1 million per person to get them out of homelessness. And we wonder why we're facing a massive budget deficit, because we are burning money left and right on programs that aren't working and aren't improving anything in the state of Washington. And now they're going to come to you for more money. So be prepared for that. That segment was brought to you in partnership with our friends over at Future 42. Turn your frustration into action at future42.org.